brief review of my history. I've worked for Urethane Polymers on the production side for about 2 years. So a lot of these coatings I've manufactured. I specialized in the polyurethane production. Diego Lewis specialized in the water-based acrylics production. So we're very familiar with these materials, and both of us have worked inside of our quality lab. So we kind of know the ins and outs for each one of our systems, and that's the main reason why not only are we in sales, but we also support with technical assistance as well. So we like to spend a lot of time with our contractors, educate them on our systems. Thus, we put together a training here at Sunshine Supply, and thank you all for coming out. Diego, did you want to introduce yourself?
How you doing, guys? My name is Diego Lewis. I'm Howard Lanier's associate teammate. I also handle the national account with Tufflex Polymers, as well as UPI, Urethane Polymers International. We're looking forward to a great training today. We appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come learn about what we offer here at UPI. So, just looking forward to it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask either myself or Howard during the presentation, and we'll be good.
Okay, so I put together a small presentation that will go through an overview of the systems that we're going to be addressing today. We'll also address some of those systems, the coatings in conjunction with those systems, as well as surface preparation for both a plywood or concrete substrates to which these systems are specified to be applied over. So, Urethane Polymers International Inc., which I said is the manufacturer for both Tufflex and Excellent Coatings. UPI manufactures a line of acrylic, polyurethane, polyurea hybrid traffic coating systems that are chemical resistant, epoxy coatings right in Southern California and Fontana, California, under the strictest environmental regulations in the nation. See if I can get my, there we go. Good waterproofing practices. Select and specify complete systems from a reputable manufacturer such as UPI. Design and structure adequate slope, drainage, specify the appropriate protection, the waterproofing system. Select fully adhere systems, which each one of our coatings in relation to Excellent Coatings as well as Tufflex Polymers are. And follow the guidelines for the manufacturer's installations. Great waterproofing design practices. Design and hold specifications for systems from the manufacturer that actively demonstrate the value of their products, services, and firm to your clients, such as yourselves. When to select acrylic coatings. Plywood or concrete substrates is what our Excellent Coating systems are specified to be installed over. And then we'll go into our Excellent Coatings pedestrian systems. Where are acrylic coatings used? Substrates, concrete or plywood, walkways, balconies, as well as balcony decks. Apartments, multi-residential, motels, theme parks, schools, churches, remedial retrofit as well. Excellent Coatings pedestrian system is structured as follows. This is our standard pedestrian system, which works in conjunction with the system that we're going to be displaying today. All of these coatings work in relation to that system, and then we'll also address our Excellent Coatings fire system that we'll also be demonstrating today. The structure of that system is to be installed over a concrete substrate. First coat would be our Excel-Coat 120 water-based primer. That's a two-component water-based primer, A and B mixing, and it is a 1-to-1 mixing ratio. Very simple. That 120 water-based epoxy primer is applied at 250, 300 square feet per gallon, allow it to cure. And then your fiberglass mat will be laid over the deck surface. That fiberglass mat will be reinforced with the Excel-Coat base resin, followed, allowed to fully cure, of course, followed by the Excel-Coat 200 texture coat, which is one of the coatings that we'll be displaying as well. And then our Excel-Coat 300 top coat. Excel-Coat fire rated system, specified over plywood substrates. Metal lath, diamond lath, that is installed over the plywood substrates, stapled with 22 to 25 staples per square foot. And then that Excel-Crete would be embedded into that diamond lath, which we'll also display today. The fiberglass mat will be laid over that Excel-Crete after that material has fully cured, reinforced with that base resin, very similar to our standard pedestrian system. Once that cures, the Excel-Coat 200 can be applied for textured and slip resistance, and then the Excel-Coat 300 will be applied over the top. Going deeper into our Excel-Crete fire system, it's a heavy-duty pedestrian system, Class A fire-rated acrylic decking system. We do have our ICC ESR rating. Install over a minimum of 5/8 inch plywood, extended metal lath, and fiberglass reinforced membrane, polymerized, cementitious underlayment, a monolithic waterproof wearing surface for pedestrian traffic, and permits a variety of texture and design toppings. Going deeper into our excellent coatings fire rated system, first address to check the flashing. Install the galvanized metal lath, 22 to 25 staples per square foot. Mix and trowel the Polymers cementitious material, which will be our Excel-Crete. Check for proper slope, bird baths, so that way we don't create ponding areas. Install membrane along with fiberglass mat of the excellent coatings, Excel-Crete 1 base resin. Detail the membrane. You can do an additional skim coat right over that membrane and have it water tested, or water test right over that membrane. Apply the texture coating, which is available in the Excel-Crete 200 texture coat for an orange peel finish, or the Excel-Crete Knockdown or KD for a knockdown finish. And then apply 2 to 3 seal coats of the Excel-Crete 300. Flashing and metal lath. Deck seal tape, low rise gravel stop flashing, and edge flashing. The flashing will be overlapped with that diamond lath a 1/2 inch to a full inch, so that way we can create a nice uniform system and a nice uniform coat of that Excel-Crete material. Hold back the lath from the edge of the drains. Hold back a 1/2 inch from the drain or dissimilar metals. Most often we run into scenarios on the job site where the flashing may be stainless steel, however the drain flange may be copper. So we want to avoid overlapping over those dissimilar metals. That'll allow us to install the galvanized metal lath a 1/2 inch away from that drain surface or away from the flange. Excel-Crete underlayment. Staple lath, Excel-Crete mixed with the clear additive is troweled with the flat side of the trowel a 1/4 inch thick over that diamond lath to embed that Excel-Crete. That's what allows us that 1 hour Class A fire rating. Brief example of that trowel method being installed, embedding that Excel-Crete into the diamond lath. Stair flashing detail. There's L flashing at each of the transitions from vertical to horizontal. That's going to help us to create a nice monolithic system, but also prevent the possibility of water intrusion at those turn angles. Stair nosing is available for the Excellent Coatings line of products, and that stair nosing will add a bit more of a decorative flair and give a little bit of a flash to our coating systems. An example of the fiberglass mat being cut over the deck surface. Another example, you want to make sure that that fiberglass mat is laid flush to the deck surface, and you don't want the edges of the fiberglass mat to overlap, but rather you want to butt the edges together so that way we can create a nice even surface without any humps or low spots. And then you would pour on your Excel-Crete 1 resin, work from the center out to create your waterproofing membrane over that fiberglass mat. Another example of that same process being installed over the stairs where the flashing was addressed. And then an example of what the complete Excel-Crete base resin looks like once it's embedded into that fiberglass mat and allowed to fully cure. At this point, this is your waterproofing membrane. Technically, it'd be waterproof, but of course, we want to add some protection as well as some slip resistance. Thus, the spraying the texture. Our 200 texture can be roller applied or hopper gun applied. Most applicators prefer the hopper gun application. It offers the ability to get a nice uniform textured surface rather than having to work the roller and create that yourselves. So with that hopper gun application, which will also display for a hopper gun application of our Excel-Crete 200 and address the KD mixing ratios and that application as well. Spraying the hopper gun, an example of what that looks like. And for that hopper gun application, you'd like to adjust the pressure for that hopper to 8 to 15 pounds per square inch. That's going to help to offer a nice uniform surface. Of course, the higher the pressure, smaller the granules. Excel-Crete finish options. Finish options for the fire-rated system and concrete toppings are the same. Spray texture, we offer two-tone finishes, as well as that KD or KD2 knockdown texture. Tape and trowel patterns, tape and trowel skin patterns, as well as stamped impressions also. And a brief example of what a tape and trowel system might look like with our excellent coatings material. Another example, and I like the backdrop, so I always try to show this picture, and it's nice to see these bigger projects where these systems have been installed to give you an idea of what a complete system is structured as and looks like. Another brief example, and if you notice that drain has been applied properly, the two coats of the XL system of the XL300 top coat came out beautifully, and it's a great photo on the backdrop as well. Again, can be addressed for walkways, porta-shares, or balcony decks. Most commonly we find those balcony decks, but it is a tremendous water-based acrylic system that offers great waterproofing practices as well. When to select polyurethane coatings. Sorry about that. Moving towards...
While we were waiting for that, we have a question online.
Yes.
Is Lath and Crete applied to the stairs also?
Lath and Crete is applied to the stairs as well, correct. For our Excel-Coat fire-rated system, 100%. Moving on to our Tufflex Pedestrian Systems, which are our polyurethane pedestrian traffic coatings. Pedestrian decks over occupied space, walkways, stairways, balconies, plazas, or plaza decks rather, condominiums, high-end multi-residential, commercial buildings, hotels, private schools, remedial retrofit, of course. My preference when specifying polyurethane systems is typically what I lean toward. The water-based acrylic systems perform very well, and they are great waterproofing, but I lean towards these Tufflex pedestrian coatings because they offer a bit more longevity that I find than the water-based acrylic systems. But both are available here at Sunshine Supply. Performance characteristics of Tufflex polyurethane systems. They're fully adhered, excellent adhesion, elastomeric, the ability to bridge substrate cracks, monolithic, liquid applied, impact and abrasion resistant, weather resistant, flexible in cold temperatures, which is another reason why I specify these systems, UV resistant, durable, slip resistant due to that aggregate binding coat, which we'll also display today, and they're perfect for pedestrian or vehicular traffic coatings, and we offer VOC compliant. Here in Southern California, we have to operate under those strict regulations. We have the material to be able to do so. Tufflex Polymers, pedestrian traffic bearing systems. The first system that I like to discuss is our Tufflex pedestrian system over plywood. Plywood substrate, this is just the structure of the system, and we'll address each one of these coatings in between. Plywood substrate, Tuff-Poxy primer number 3, which is also a 2-component epoxy primer. However, this is a high solid, so 100% solids epoxy primer. This primer will act as a sealer for the plywood substrate, but also act as an adhesive, so to speak, for that waterproofing membrane, which will be the Tufflex base coat. Tufflex base coat is offered in 2 variations. We have standard outdoor that does incorporate solvent, so it's a bit more fragrant. And we also offer our solvent-free that I tend to suggest, especially when working in residential areas or over a living space. After that Tufflex base coat is cured, there's an aggregate binding coat of the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL, and that will receive a broadcast of 20 mesh or 30 mesh sand aggregate, round silica sand. After that aggregate binding coat is completely cured, you remove the excess aggregate either with a blower or a stiff bristle broom to remove any excess aggregate or loose particles. And then once that is accomplished, you can then coat with a single pass of that Tufflex Polymers Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL top coat. Moving into the Tufflex pedestrian system over concrete. Of course, we start with the concrete substrate. That same Topcoating primer number 3 can be used. Mixing ratio for the Topcoating primer number 3 is a bit different than the water-based 120 epoxy primer for excellent coatings. Rather than a 1-to-1 mixing ratio, for the Topcoating primer number 3, it's a 2-to-1 mixing ratio, 2 parts A to 1 part B. They're available in 1.5 gallon kits, 3 gallon kits, or 15-gallon kits. That Topcoating primer number 3 usually takes about 3 hours to cure, and then that base coat can be applied. It doesn't have to, that Topcoating primer number 3 does not have to be cured completely until it's hard. However, you do want to make sure that if it were to be touched, that you wouldn't remove that. that coating. So you want a small amount of surface tack, which is okay, but not so tacky that you're removing coating if you were to roll on that base coat. The Tufflex base coat, again, standard outdoor or solvent-free. Of course, for a concrete substrates, especially in relation to our pedestrian systems, I'd still suggest that solvent-free rather than the standard outdoor, especially if it's going to be installed in a residential property. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL will again act as an aggregate binding coat that would receive that broadcast of 20 mesh or 30 mesh sand aggregate, allow that to fully cure. Once again, you would remove the excess aggregate either with a blower or a stiff bristle broom. Make sure that it's clean and free of debris before you install the second pass of that Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL top coat. And then one of the systems that I tend to lean towards can be applied over a concrete or plywood substrate would be our Elasta-Tuff 5000 6000 pedestrian system. That system, be it applied over plywood or concrete, of course, surface preparation is needed. That Topcoating primer number 3 acts as the same primer, acts as an adhesion or an adhesive as well as a sealer for that substrate. However, with the Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat, it's a single component base coat, so there's no need to mix any additional materials with that Elasta-Tuff 5000. Whereas our Tufflex base coat, such as a standard outdoor or solvent-free, have to be mixed with water. They are a water-catalyzed base coat. The major difference that I find between the 5000 base coat and the Tufflex, either standard outdoor or solvent-free, is one, the standard outdoor and solvent-free cure a lot faster than that 5000 base coat. So the 5000 is great for ease of application. However, if you're working in a timely manner or if you're familiar with polyurethane coatings, I tend to lean towards that Tufflex standard outdoor solvent free. It is water catalyzed with that standard outdoor solvent free, so you would mix water with the single component base coat. You give it a brief mix, make sure that the consistency is uniform and the color is uniform for that 5000 base coat. After that Elasta-Tuff 5000 is fully cured, then you would install the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AR, which is an aromatic coating. One thing that I always try to address, especially with contractors, is we have to be aware of the difference between the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AR and the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL. That Elasta-Tuff 6000 AR is an aromatic coating, and it does not offer the same UV stability as the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL. So I do not suggest interchanging the two materials. Most of my applicators, even if they're using the aggregate to install their aggregate binding coat, most commonly they'll still go with the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL to prevent any confusion on the job sites. That's completely your prerogative. After that AR coating has received its broadcast of sand aggregate, fully cured, you'd remove the excess aggregate, very similar to the other two systems that we just discussed. Make sure that it's clean and free of any debris, and then you would apply the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL top coat. New plywood substrates. I'd like to move into surface preparation. New plywood substrates. Of course, there's going to be seams and joists that need to be addressed. Even with a monolithic system that is offering the flexibility that Tufflex does, we want to reinforce those joists. So, for new plywood surface preparation, sweep all plywood joints clean and free of debris of sawdust. Fill all separations over 1/16 of an inch in width with polyurethane sealant. Apply joint reinforcement consisting of a brush coat of Tufflex base coat, solvent-free, standard outdoor, or 5000 base coat at 30 mils thick, 5-inch wide seam tape or reinforcement fabric should be installed centered over all joints and transitions from metal flashing and drip edge flashing, etc. Embed 3-inch or 4-inch wide UPI or Tufflex reinforcement fabric. The reinforcement fabric is offered in white glass fabric. Diego, do you mind displaying that white glass fabric, please? A 3-inch white glass fabric, and then we also offer a 4-inch or 6-inch PW fabric as well. And this is a 6-inch PW fabric. And that's to reinforce those joints along with the polyurethane sealant, as well as a brief brush coat or a detail coat of that base membrane. New structural concrete substrate. Conditions of a concrete surface. Concrete surfaces shall be sound structural grade 2,500 psi, compressive strength recommended, A minimum of 3 inches shall have been steel troweled, followed by a broom finish, free of fins, ridges, voids, air entrained holes. Concrete shall be cured at least 28 days, completely dry, and sloped for proper drainage. That would prevent the possibility of negative slope or for having to readjust that slope with any additional materials. Saw cut joists or expansion joints shall have been properly installed at strategic points throughout the field of the deck to control, to control cracking caused by deflection or shrinkage, of course. As the weather changes, it gets colder, warmer, that concrete tends to shift, expand, and contract. We want to make sure that we address these joists just to ensure that we don't endure any cracking after the fully coated system has been installed. Any required crickets or drains should be installed at this time that the main deck is poured. Voids, rock pockets, excessively rough surfaces shall be finished with an epoxy grout or sand, cement, acrylic, latex smoothing coat. Rehabilitating existing concrete substrates. Concrete surface preparation. The concrete must be thoroughly clean, completely dry, free of any surface contaminants or cleaning residue. All cracks over 1/16 of an inch in width and all moving cracks under one. I'll let the plane go by, sorry. All cracks over 1/16 of an inch in width and all moving cracks under 1/16 of an inch shall be routed out to a 1/4 inch minimum in width and depth and filled flush with the Tufflex approved polyurethane caulking compound or polyurethane sealant. All expansion and contraction joints shall be cleaned, primed, fitted with backing rod, and caulked with the UPI or Tufflex approved polyurethane caulking compound. Caulk joints under 1/2 inch in width and all caulked cracks shall be primed and stripe coated with Tufflex base coat, Concrete surface preparation. Concrete must be thoroughly cleaned, free of residue. All cracks 1/16 of an inch and all moving cracks, we will address again, filled flush with the Tufflex approved polyurethane sealant. All cracks shall be stripe coated with a 25 to 30 mil thick Tufflex elastomeric base membrane detail coat. And the reinforcement fabric should overlap and be centered at the crack at a distance exceeding 2 inches on either side of the crack. Any expansion and contraction joints shall be cleaned, fitted with backing rod, and caulked with the Tufflex approved elastomeric sealant. And then a brief photo of some of the surface preparation. Mechanically grinding that surface to a CSP3 or CSP4 is acceptable for our polyurethane systems. So of course they're grinding that concrete and looks like removal of the existing coating. The primer has been installed. That Tufflex base membrane is being installed over that complete deck surface. The Tufflex base coat, be it standard outdoor, solvent-free, or 5000, shall be notch trowel or squeegee applied to help to build up the mill thickness, but also these are self-leveling materials. So that will help to get a consistent material and then also allow that material to enforce its self-leveling properties. After that membrane has been notch trowel or squeegee applied, you would follow with backrolling that material to prevent the possibility of outgassing. With the 5000 base coat, should be applied at 32 mils thick maximum. With the Tufflex base coat, the standard or outdoor or solvent-free perform a lot better, being the fact that you can apply those up to 60 mils thick without the possibility of outgassing. So I tend to lean towards the Tufflex base coat more than the 5000 unless you're a beginning applicator, because you can build the mill thickness of that Tufflex base coat a lot farther than you can with the 5000 base coat. Brief photo of the base coat being installed, fully cured now. When applying that Tufflex base coat, I always suggest to wear the spike shoes. That way, once you're back rolling that material after it's been notch troweled or squeegee applied, you don't run the risk of leaving footprints or impressions into that coating. Aggregate binding coat consists of that Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL coating that receives that broadcast. That excess aggregate has already been removed, of course the spike shoes, and he is back rolling that top coat over that and encapsulating that aggregate. Brief description of that roller application as well as back rolling with that Elasta-Tuff 6000 base coat, or top coat rather, excuse me. Thank you very much. That will wrap up our presentation, and we'll move into some surface preparation and some hands-on demonstrations of our material. Morning. All right, so I want to start with the Excel-Crete into the overlay. Let me know when I'm good, James. Yes, each one of these boards will move into the center so that way we can have it. Surface preparation for the Excel-Crete, especially with our 1-hour fire rated system. Of course, your flashing should be already in place. L flashing for the deck to wall flashing, and either drip edge or L flashing for the perimeter flashing as well. That diamond lath, 2.5 galvanized metal lath, shall overlap the flashing a minimum of a ½ inch. You can go up to a full inch. And you want to make sure that that diamond lath is stapled with 22 to 25 staples per square foot. This is an example of what that would look like when your flashing is installed. Should be nailed in a W pattern from the center, about 3 inches each nail. That's going to help to fasten our flashing, and the corners shall be reinforced with polyurethane sealant as well. Flashing should sit in the bead of polyurethane sealant along with being properly nailed to the surface. That's going to allow us to install our waterproof coatings right over the top, over that galvanized metal lath, but also where we terminate between the horizontal and vertical transition. It gives us the ability to be able to build up that mill thickness. I love that. So, an example of what that diamond lath looks like once it's installed over the entire substrate via this small replica deck. We'll go through the mixing procedures and application, embedding that Excel-Crete into that diamond lath. Ernesto and Diego are going to pour our Excel-Crete. So the mixing ratio for our Excel-Crete cementitious material is 1 gallon to 1¼ gallons per 50-pound bag. So we'll do about a ½ bag, so we'll go with about 2 pints of liquid polymer. Absolutely. So we'll start with the liquid polymer, so that way we're not pouring liquid into the powder material. And I have a cutter over there. So when mixing the Excel-Crete, the way that we suggest this to be performed, pour your liquid polymer into the pail, of course, your 1 gallon to 1¼ gallons, and mix in half of the bag first, so that way you can get a nice consistent material before adding additional Excel-Crete grade powder. And of course, Diego likes to swim in the material, so he's gonna inhale some of that good Excel-Crete.
Gives you more energy.
Now, at a low speed with that drill mixer, Ernesto is going to blend to mix both of those materials to create a nice, uniform, cementitious coating. He's going to mix at a slow speed so that he doesn't trap air pockets into that cementitious material that can cause dissimilar materials or have clumps of that powder coating. With this Excel-Crete material, he's going to trowel this material to embed it into this diamond lath. He's going to use the flat side of the trowel so that way we create a nice smooth finish. This Excel-Crete material will embed that metal lath and be about a 1/4 inch thickness.
You probably already answered it, but what's the detail on the seams again?
The detail for the seams, for this reinforcement of the diamond lath, right along these seams, it should be stapled in a nice uniform fashion, so that way, if it were to overlap those seams, at both of the corners, we penetrate with each side of the The plywood seams. The plywood seams don't have to be reinforced with the polyurethane sealant for this fire-rated system. And you can take that additional method to reinforce those seams with polyurethane sealant and embed that PW fabric or white glass fabric, but it is not 100% necessary. Can be applied, not one of the strict regulations.
They can still get a warranty if they don't fabric the wood?
Correct.
And your lap, does it overlap?
The lath does not overlap. The edges shall butt together, very similar to how we do with the fiberglass mat, and I'll also display that as well. So the lath will not overlap, or else you'd create a high spot in the coating. To avoid that, the edges should be butt together, and if you notice, just along this transition, let's say that these were 2 sections of lath coming together. You'd want that staple to be centered, so that way you can reinforce each side of that diamond lath to create a nice uniform surface. Staples on the seam, I would still suggest 22 to 25 per square foot. However, I tend to suggest more is always better, so that way we can create a nice uniform surface rather than running the possibility of it not being enough staples and then creating a high spot. So I always say, go crazy. So he's going to check to make sure that we don't have any high spots or low spots with our staples. Make sure that none of the staples are protruding over that deck surface. Make sure that when we embed that Excel-Crete, we don't create a high spot.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll pass around a mic just so all of us can hear it.
Yes, the PowerPoint will be available. We can send you a link to just submit your email and a few other details, and we'll send it to you through email. Yes, we are planning to start recording them for recordings, so you can watch them on our YouTube live. But you should be able to access after the event as well.
With that diamond lath, you're going to want to make sure that we secure the edges, especially around the perimeter or any transitions where the lath terminates. So those staples should be stapled around the perimeter at the same fashion that you would address a seam, for instance. Trusty hammer to make sure that all the staples are completely penetrating that diamond lath, and also to make sure that we have a nice uniform surface. Any high spots, Ernesto's going to hammer down to make sure that when we do that Excel-Crete coating, that we don't have a high spot around that termination. Going to run the head of the hammer across the deck surface to make sure that there's not any high spots. Anywhere that he feels any staples protruding, he'd hammer them flush. Once the diamond lath is prepared, all your staples are nice and flush. Pour into the center of the deck the Excel-Crete materials, a little thick. He's going to trowel that material to embed that Excel-Crete directly into that metal lath, and his goal is a 1/4 inch thick with this application. He wants to completely coat that diamond lath, but also to create a nice smooth surface once that Excel-Crete cures. So he'll pour in the center and work his way out. You can start with one side of the deck and gradually work your way to the other side of the deck. Again, his goal is a 1/4 inch thick in thickness. To make this Excel-Crete material easier to work with or a little more fluid, you can always add an additional amount of Excel-Crete. I would suggest about 1/4 gallon at a time. Is going to evenly smooth out that Excel-Crete material. Excel-Crete takes about 6 to 8 hours to cure. I suggest allowing a full 24 hours after that Excel-Crete has been applied before installing the waterproofing membrane, just so that way we can make sure that our cementitious material is completely cured. Following that cure, you want to make sure that we sand down any high spots of that Excel-Crete that may be left over, or any trowel marks that may be left over after that material is fully cured, so that way we create a nice even surface for our waterproofing membrane to reinforce that fiberglass. And that Excel-Crete material, again, takes 6 to 8 hours to cure. I always suggest allowing a full 24 hours. After that Excel-Crete has fully cured, we've sanded down any high spots or remaining trowel marks. That's where the Excel coat number 1 would reinforce that fiberglass mat. Very similar to the diamond lath, we want the edges of the fiberglass mat not to overlap, however, to butt those edges together that we can reinforce with the Excel Coat 1 resin. The Excel-Coat resin shall be, not squeegee, roller applied, working from the center out, and along with that Excel-Coat resin, can you grab the metal roller? Metal in the box. The Excel-Coat number 1 should be spread at 50 square feet per gallon over that fiberglass mat once it's laid flush over the deck surfaces. Of course, butt those edges together, roll from the center out. Once you have rolled on at 50 square feet per gallon of that Excel-Coat number 1, you'd roll from the center out with a fiberglass metal roller. That's to push down any air pockets and also to create a nice uniform surface. In addition, it will help to push that Excel-Coat number 1 over the top of that fiberglass mat to create a pinhole-free waterproofing membrane. That is our major goal. Now, that Excel-Coat 1 resin takes about 6 to 8 hours to cure. Once that membrane is fully cured, you have the selection of your texture coats. Before the texture is applied, you can do an additional skim coat of the Excel-Crete to protect that waterproofing membrane of the base resin with fiberglass mat. You can do an additional coat just as an extra barrier. However, that doesn't change the specifications. So, of course, you can always add an additional coat if you want to offer more protection. But also, in addition, to protect that Excel-Crete, you can do a skim coat at 1/8 of an inch thick rather than the 1/4 inch like we did into the Diamond Lath of that Excel-Crete material to protect the membrane. Then you're up to selecting your preference of, or the customer's preference rather, of your texture coating. Excel-Coat offers 2 different texture styles. One is a knockdown finish, the other is our Excel-Coat 200 texture. 200 texture offers more of an orange peel finish rather than the knockdown finish. The Excel-Coat 200 texture is already pre-mixed with the liquid polymer. So there's no mixing that's necessary other than a brief blend to make sure that you have a nice consistent material. With the Excel-Coat KD, however, it comes in a powder form to which Excel-Crete liquid polymer can also be mixed into it. So, the Excel KD, the 200 that's pre-mixed? Of course, and you can perform a knockdown texture with that 200. However, it does not offer the same knockdown flare that the Excel KD. So, with that Excel-Coat 200 texture, it's already been pre-mixed with that polymer modified, or with a liquid polymer, and as well as the bag product that already gets introduced during the production schedule. So that liquid polymer has already been pre-mixed with that Excel-Coat 200. For instance, if we were going to apply this Excel-Coat 200 for an orange peel finish, we'd give a brief mix to that peel. Yes, I got you.
We have a question from the live. How can you avoid wrinkles in fiberglass when applying the resin?
The best way to avoid wrinkles in the fiberglass is that metal fiberglass roller. When you're applying that Excel-Coat 1 resin with the fiberglass, you want to make sure that you want to roll from the center out, so that way we can create a nice even surface. However, being that the fiberglass is most often offered in rolls or folded, you want to make sure that you use the metal fiberglass roller to roll from the center out to push down any air pockets or any high spots in that fiberglass. Maybe.
Do you have a window after you do the resin and the fiberglass before you can texture?
Excuse me?
Is there a window for how long that can stay exposed before you texture it?
Yes, I would not suggest extending that process over 24 hours. If that membrane has already been applied, within 24 hours after that membrane has been applied, you want to make sure that we protect that with either a skim coat or the texture coat. excuse me, the question was, how long can you leave the membrane exposed before you need to protect either with a skim coat or a texture coat?
So it's okay just to go straight with the texture?
Yes, so the question was if you can apply the texture right over that membrane of the Excel coat one with the fiberglass mat. Yes, you can. I often suggest a skim coat to protect that membrane because it offers more longevity over time. However, the system can be installed with a texture coat applied right directly over that membrane and fiberglass mat. Sir?
What's the orifice size on that hopper gun?
Excuse me?
The orifice size on that hopper gun?
That's an excellent question. I'm not 100% certain. I will find out.
What was the size of that orifice size on the hopper gun?
This has several different sizes. I'm not certain what it's already at right now. Diego? So for the KD texture, again, we're going to mix that liquid polymer with that 50-pound bag. Same mixing ratio as the Excel-Crete, 1 gallon to 1¼ gallons per 50-pound bag. The Excel-Crete liquid polymer for the texture coating is offered in either clear or can be pigmented so you can see the difference in between each level. If mixed with the clear, the KD texture powder will come out to a white finish. If mixed with the pigmented or colored polymer modified liquid, then it will be the tint of either one of the varieties of our 200 texture colors. So 1 gallon of the liquid polymer gets mixed into the pail per 50-pound bag. Of course, you mix your liquid polymer first, pour into the pail, then add your powder product. This is the Excel-Crete KD for that knockdown finish. With a slow speed drill mixer, we're going to mix that Excel-Crete KD for that knockdown finish. At a slow speed, make sure that we don't entrap any air into that coating. Each mix will yield about 75 square feet per batch.
I don't want to overspray the camera. That's why I moved to the video. No, bro, don't worry about it.
If you were to install stamped impressions or our tape and trowel system, then we do offer a fine KD texture powder that you perform that application with. So the regular KD powder is for just your standard knockdown texture. The fine KD powder would be for stamped impressions or a tape and trowel system. The Excel-Coat 200, which is already pre-mixed, is for the orange peel texture. Going to pour that mix into his hopper. Your hopper should be set at 8 to 15 pounds per square inch, so that way you can get a nice uniform texture. Again, the smaller the nozzle, the smaller the granules are going to be.
We have a question from the live. Is an egg beater mixer the approved mixer?
Yes, sir. An egg beater mixer is the approved mixer with the Excel-Crete as well as the Excel knockdown texture. You want to spray in a nice uniform wave pattern. That's going to allow you the appropriate spread rate to create a nice uniform textured surface. And then you will use the flat side of the trowel to knock that texture down and give us a nice even blend. And trowel, knock it down. Flat. You're going to use moderate pressure to give us that knockdown finish for that KD texture. This KD texture or the 200 texture coat will offer some slip resistance for the balcony deck or patio or for the pedestrian walking surface. So the texture acts as an aggregate, so to speak, for slip resistance. Of course, you also would not want to leave this exposed for over 24 to 36 hours, I would say. The same would apply if you were to install a skim coat. You want to get that texture onto that skim coat as soon as possible, but of course not to exceed about 24 to 36 hours. Just to prevent the possibility of saturation and rain or the elements causing an issue with the coating before the next coat gets to be applied. Which would be the color, correct. Yeah. For an orange peel texture, you would load the Excel-Coat 200, but rather than to knock it down, you'd leave that coating, slightly adjust the nozzle to a smaller spray, so that way you can create a nice uniform surface. But since you're not going to knock it down, you want to use a little bit more material because you're not going to spread it with that knockdown procedure. Correct. Going to clean out our hopper here. This is 200. Can you walk it around so everyone can get an eye of what the 200 looks like? And then for the knockdown also, please, before you sit it in the center. So Diego's going to walk to display what that 200 texture looks like with that orange peel finish, and he'll also bring around the knockdown so you can get an idea of what the knockdown looks like. So the middle orifice for the KD knockdown texture, and you can go smaller for the 200 texture.
You don't want to go too small, right?
Of course, because then, yes, the granules will get trapped into the nozzle, so you don't want to go too small with that orifice adjustment. This is a display of what that orange peel texture would look like with the 200 texture. This is the 200 neutral. And Diego's going to walk by to give a display of what that knockdown texture looks like once the knockdown is applied. So this one is not knocked down with the trowel also. This one is just spray applied, left to sit. The knockdown has been knocked down with the flat side of the trowel.
Howard, can you explain with the 200, it can come in temp base and we can tint it?
Correct. Correct. So the 200 can come pre-tinted, or Sunshine Supply has the ability to tint that tin base to your preferred color. And the same applies with the KD. You can purchase the liquid polymer or the clear or the liquid additive in tinted or clear. Clear will lead to a neutral color such as a white. Tinted will lead to whichever color you prefer. Once your texture coat is cured, which takes 6 to 8 hours, you're ready to begin the application of the Excel-Crete 300 top coat. This Excel-Crete 300 top coat is roller applied directly over the surface, but you want to make sure you do 2 to 3 passes. Each pass of this Excel-Crete 300 top coat should be roller applied at about 250 square feet per gallon. So it's a very thin pass of the Excel-Crete 300 top coat. The reason for that is if it's over applied or applied too thick, you run the possibility of that coating cracking. So you want to make sure that you do 2 thin passes at a minimum of 250 square feet per gallon. If you do those 2 passes, you'll achieve a total thickness or a total spread rate of about 125 square feet per gallon. Once you receive your Excel-Crete 300 top coat, you want to give it a brief mix or a brief stir to make sure that your color is consistent and uniform, and of course to identify that it is the color that you selected.
We have a question from the live. Can the 200 be rolled instead of sprayed with a hopper?
Correct. The Excel-Crete 200 can be rolled at the same spread rate, 75 square feet per gallon for the Excel-Crete 200. I've found that it can be challenging to perform that application. One of the challenges that I've come across is you then have thicker spots and less thick spots. To prevent that possibility, one thing that you can do is roll in a circular motion when you're rolling apply that Excel-Crete 200 to make sure that you create a nice even surface at any spots that you find that are thicker than the desired thickness.
So just a couple things here. So this is gunmetal. You know, it's a kind of a darker gray. If you guys can see it here, before it's mixed, it's black, right? So it needs a good consolidation mix. Sometimes we get calls from customers, it doesn't look like what it needs to. And people are using stir sticks, and we want a mechanical mixer. We want it properly mixed. I don't know, yeah, if you want to tilt down, or we can move the GoPro. There's that, and then just other best practices. Let us know when we can move it back and he can mix it. Sometimes I've heard of installers, you know, we talked about how we can tint the 200. You know, let's say you were going with like a Monterey sand, like a darker tan top coat. They may say, hey, I want the 200 tinted in sand dune. So you know what your texture layer is, and then they go over it with 2 layers of Monterey sand. So then, you know, the foreman that's doing kind of the quality control, he knows the texture coat's been fully covered. You can get them both in the same color. So in case the top coat were to, you know, need some maintenance coating in the future, you'll still see the same color of the texture coat. Different approaches there for you, but just know we have that flexibility to modify the approach on the tinting.
So Ernesto's going to give this a brief mix. Of course, he's going to center it, the drill mixer, at the base of the pail to create a vortex to be able to mix in all of that material. It's going to go at a fairly slow speed, so that way he doesn't trap any air into the coating before we get to roll or apply that material. Our goal is a nice consistency of material and a nice uniform color.
So it's recommended to redo the last coat every other certain year.
Great question. So the question was if it's recommended to recoat every so often. Typically with the Excellent Coatings Fire Rated or the Excellent Coatings Pedestrian System, I enforce or I suggest that every 3 to 5 years that you achieve a recoat application. I also suggest walking the project to make sure that there aren't any water intrusions or possible leaks before recoating, so that any additional measures may be taken. If we have to patch an area of a deck, that can be addressed. If there's cracking or spalls in a certain area of a deck, those can be addressed. So I suggest typically every 3 to 5 years.
That's what I always
Yes,
recommend.
correct.
Just wanna corroborate what
Great
I'm
question.
doing.
Great question.
All right.
The color is becoming nice and consistent. So again, our Excel-Crete 300 should be applied in 2 to 3 passes, 250 square feet per gallon each pass. Doing multiple passes, we want to allow that material to fully cure before we apply the next level of material. So if we're doing 2 passes, we want to allow the Excel-Crete 300 initial pass to cure 6 to 8 hours before performing the second application of that top coat.
We have another question from the live. Is primer recommended for a recoat?
Primer is recommended for a recoat application. We offer 2 primers for the Excel-Crete systems. There is our Excel-Crete 155 primer as well as our Excel-Crete 120 primer. Most common, the preferred primer is the Excel-Crete 120 primer, 1-to-1 mixing ratio. The Excel-Crete 120 primer takes about 2 to 3 hours to cure. Once it's achieved the proper cure, small amount of surface tack is okay. Then you can apply your coat of Excel-Crete 300 top coat. I would still suggest 2 passes of that Excel-Crete 300 top coat, even if you're doing whether you're doing a brand new installation or if you're recoating. I would only suggest recoating maybe 2 to 3 times, and then an additional walk I would suggest, just to ensure that we're not building that coating up too thick, because you'll lose some of that surface texture each time we do an additional coat. So after about the 3rd recoat, I suggest a slight grind, at least down to the skim coat of that Excel-Crete, just so that way you can reapply texture, recreate that aggregate texture surface for slip resistance before applying an additional top coat. So Ernesto's going to roller apply that material, moderate pressure, and then back roll that material to make sure that he's not missing any spots. Again, should be applied in 2 coats. We want to allow that first pass to fully cure before we install the second coating of that Excel-Crete 300 top coat. Ernesto's going to roll that material on, north to south, then east and west. Beautiful. Next, we'll do the application of the Excel-Crete 300 top coat over the knockdown texture, so you can get an idea of what the final product looks like, be it orange peel texture or a knockdown. Thank you, gentlemen. The same application rules should be applied whether you're installing over the 200 texture or the knockdown texture. We still suggest 2 thin passes at the same spread rate, 250 square feet per gallon. ¿Preguntas? It's going to roll it on as well as back roll to create a nice uniform coating. And of course, he's going to roll north and south as well as east and west. Again, the Excel-Crete 300 top coat takes 6 to 8 hours to cure. However, if exposed in direct sunlight, it'll cure a bit faster, typically around 3 to 4 hours. If the application is performed in a shaded area, then you're looking at closer to that 6 to 8 hour mark. Any questions for application of the Excel-Crete Class A fire rated system? Beautiful. So we'll move on to the surface preparation for our polyurethane systems under the Tufflex Polymers brand of products. One of the things that I always address is most of the trouble or leaking spots, especially in relation to deck coatings, typically come from improper installation or reinforcement of the flashing. Deck to wall flashing shall be L metal flashing for that transition from horizontal to vertical. 2x4, 4x4, 4x6. I always suggest at least 4x4, 4x6. These are a little smaller because the decks are smaller, but I want to give you an idea of what it looks like. That flashing should be reinforced, as we talk about during the PowerPoint presentation, of white glass fabric or Tufflex PW fabric to reinforce those joints or transitions from the flashing to the plywood surface. The reinforcing fabric should be centered over the joist, embedded into the polyurethane sealant, and then a brush coat or a detail coat of the base membrane, be it Elasta-Tuff 5000 or Tufflex standard outdoor or solvent-free as a detail coat just around the perimeter as well as where the transition terminates from deck to wall. That will help, one, to create the waterproofing membrane and make sure that things stay watertight, but also as things shift, especially be it plywood, we want to make sure that we reinforce those joists so we don't end up with any cracking in between the flashing termination or where the plywood joists are. So that polyurethane sealant should reinforce at the transitions between the flashing to the plywood deck. And then white glass fabric or Tufflex PW fabric to reinforce and be embedded into that bead of polyurethane sealant, a brush coat or a detail coat of that base membrane to reinforce those joists. If you have a joist centered in the middle of the deck, for instance, you want to perform that same type of application. You want to install a bead of polyurethane sealant right in between that joist, embed the Tufflex PW fabric or the white glass fabric into that polyurethane sealant, and then a light brush coat at about 25 mils thick of that base membrane. That will allow the deck, even if it were to shift, it decreases the possibility of a crack along that joist that can create water intrusion possibilities and then possible water rot of the plywood surface. Surface preparation is one of the most essential parts of waterproofing, as I'm sure you all know. If the surface is not prepared properly, your chances are a lot greater of running into an issue, no matter what product you pick. So, one of the major things that we try to emphasize is surface preparation. And I would encourage you guys to do the same. Surface prep is the most essential part of our application. After the surface has been prepared properly, we want to make sure that the surface is clean, free of any dust, debris, possible chemical matter, anything that can conflict with the coating being applied. The first coating that should be applied after the surface is completely prepared, your flashing is installed, we've reinforced any joists, we've reinforced any transitions. The Tuff-Poxy primer number 3. As we discussed during the PowerPoint, the Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 is a 2-component epoxy primer, 100% solids. Part B is 1 gallon or depending on which kit size. We offer a 1.5 gallon kit, we offer a 3 gallon kit, we offer a 15 gallon kit. No matter what your kit size, the mixing ratio is always 2 parts A, 1 part B. So we're going to work with smaller increments today. So Diego's going to measure 2 parts part A of Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 to 1 part B. If you purchase a 1.5 gallon kit, you'll receive a full gallon of part A, half gallon of part B. 3 gallon kit, 2 gallons of A, 1 of B. 15 gallon kits, 10 gallons of A, 5 of B. Always a 2-to-1 mixing ratio. Even if you have to split a pail, you want to make sure that it's always 2-to-1. This Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 has about a 15 to 20 minute shelf life. So this material kicks off pretty rapidly. One of the major things that I emphasize when working with Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 is you have a lot more work time than you have pot life. So once properly mixed, you can allow the material to interact for 1 to 2 minutes after completely and uniformly mixing that product. Yes, sir? That pot life does depend on temperature. Of course, the warmer the weather, less the pot life. So our ideal temperatures are between 70 and 80 degrees. Most commonly in California, that's what we run across, but anywhere else, we want to make sure that we account for that fluctuation. So when mixing Tuff-Poxy primer number 3, once both components have been completely mixed, I allow 1 to 2 minutes induction time for the material. After that, you want to get it onto the deck surface as soon as possible, where you have a little more work time. But if you leave that material in the pot with both components mixed, it will start to cure, smoke, and it will be a nice science project. But you'll end up with a fully cured pail that is rock solid of that epoxy primer. So he's going to give it a hand mix. Since we're working with smaller quantities of material today, you can also use that low-speed drill mixer, especially for larger products where you're mixing both components. You can use a slow-speed drill mixer, the same induction time. However, you're working with a greater volume of material, so you want to be aware of that pot life when you mix that Tuff-Poxy primer number 3. He's going to make sure that he scrapes all along the edges and make sure that he removes any separations of coating. Most commonly, you'll be able to tell the difference between the part B and the part A as they're being mixed. You'll see a ribbon of the separation of the coatings. So you want to continue mixing until that ribbon is no longer present, and you want to make sure that you don't allow that induction time to breach that 10 to 15 minutes. Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 should be roller applied. You can use a 3/4 inch nap roller, most commonly used. The spread rate for Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 is 250 to 300 square feet per gallon. I have guys that go up to 350 square feet per gallon. That's still within the realm of work time. It's suggested as a thin pass of Tuff-Poxy primer number 3, one, because it helps to seal off the substrate, but also acts as an adhesive for that base coat. So he'll pour out the Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 in a ribbon, and then to roller apply, Ernesto will start from each side of the deck, roll the material nice and uniform, but also to back roll that material so that way we don't run the risk of small bubbles occurring inside the coating. Tuff-Poxy primer number 3 takes 1 to 3 hours to cure. It's a very rapid setting material. Most commonly, the higher the temperature, the decreases the cure time. So if you're installing on an 80-degree day, a 90-degree day, that material is going to kick off very rapidly. You would want to suggest or defer those extremely hot days for that application. I always encourage our guys, if it's going to be warm that day, let's start the primer a little earlier so that way it doesn't accelerate that curing process and cause bubbles in the coating. Or two, if we're working in colder temperatures, I always try to make sure that the contractors are aware, hey, it may take that material closer to that 3-hour mark to cure before we're able to install that next coating. Colder the temperature, slower the cure time. Warmer the temperature, accelerates the curing time. I'm gonna take a brief moment, clean up some of this top coat.
I could jump in, Howard. Do you mind holding the mic for me?
Yes.
So Howard mentioned, here, let's go front and center, polyurethane sealant. So we have a variety of polyurethanes that we offer, tower sealants. All of these we buy in bulk too, so we get good discounted pricing. Trimco has Dimonic 100. Their hybrid version is Dimonic FC. We want the 100. This is a great sealant, over 50% movement. When you're doing the below grade 250 GC system, you can go over this wet. And then, you know, Sika 1A, everybody knows about Sika 1A. On paper, these are going to say you need to let them cure for a certain period of time. So Sika has 11 FC fast cure. So we carry this predominantly for this type of deck coating approach. So this should set up, you know, within same day, and you can coat over it. I think in practice, you guys may, and other installers are coating over the other urethanes, and it's urethane on top of urethane, so it's a compatible system. But the fast cure is really what you want on the spec version of doing a deck coating urethane system. So we have it all in stock, but just wanted to let you guys know the different varieties that we carry. Thank you.
Most commonly, our applicators will lean toward either the Trimco or the Sika polyurethane sealant. That tends to be what the go-to.
I don't know. Did you talk about nap rollers or anything like that? Okay, so yeah, we just put down the epoxy. So nap roller, for that, you're typically going to want to get a dripless nap roller, meaning that the lint's not going to come out with it. So, you know, you may have, and 1/4 inch is normally what you just need for an epoxy. You want a thin mill. You don't want to build up your primer too much. If you build it up, it may not cure out evenly, and you want to follow all the manufacturer instructions on that. But just as far as your nap rollers, typically a dripless, so it's not going to leave lint, especially on those hotter days when that epoxy sets up a little quicker, gets thicker. It's going to pull back some of that lint if you have the wrong roller. So As we get to thicker systems like the urethane, we have, 1/2 inch, 3/8, and we'll get more into that here in a little bit.
A little more cleanup detail. So we're going to move into the application of our Tufflex base coats. We'll start with the Elasta-Tuff 5000, which is the single component base coat. Each one of our base coats in relation to the Tufflex systems are all moisture cure base coats, all self-leveling, all moisture cure. So the high humidity areas, that actually helps to increase that, or excuse me, helps to decrease that cure time of these membranes. The Elasta-Tuff 5000 single component, no need to mix any additional materials. We do have an accelerator that's available for the Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat. In the event that you needed to adjust sloping, we have an Elasta-Tuff accelerator and thickener to adjust sloping, or we offer our Elasta-Tuff 9801 or 9801, yes, accelerator. That can help to accelerate the cure time of this 5000 base coat. The Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat should be installed at 50 square feet per gallon, or about 32 wet mils. You do not want to exceed that 30 to 32 wet mils, or you run the possibility of that material outgassing. So it's very simple and easy to work with, but you have to be aware of your thickness when doing this application. Correct. So the question was, should you use a notch squeegee or a notch trowel? You were 100% accurate. A notch squeegee or a notch trowel should be used for this application. Most of our guys, if you're using a trowel, they'll use a 3/8 or 3/4 inch V-notch trowel. Or you can buy the notch squeegee for the appropriate mil thickness, anything from a 25 to 30 mil thick notch squeegee, or you can go a 30 to 35. I wouldn't suggest breaching that 35 mil thick application. Even if you wanted to do 2 passes, that's easier than if you were to exceed that mil thickness. So if you're looking to build up the mil thickness, I always encourage guys, do 2 thin passes. If you want to build up the mil thickness with the 5000 base coat, always 2 passes. You do not want to exceed 35 to 40 wet mils of that material, or else it's very likely that that material will outgas. During this application, it should be trowel or squeegee applied, followed by backrolling. Backrolling will assist to prevent the possibility of outgassing or bubbles in the coatings or any high and low spots in the coatings. However, if you've already exceeded the mil thickness, we want to stay away from that as often as possible.
Just out of my curiosity,
Yes.
I see the metals.
Mhm.
Why don't you guys recommend the drip edge metal, which helps to hold the material dripping all the way down?
Yes.
I mean, just out of my curiosity.
Yes, and we do suggest a drip edge metal flashing.
What I always use, but I see the samples here and it's like, wait a minute.
Yes, we do suggest a drip edge metal flashing. Yes, as an additional measure, you can always use a masking tape
Oh, definitely.
to tape off the perimeters of the deck surface. So yes, so that way we don't run the risk of the material overlapping the deck surface and dripping onto the areas below.
Just,
You're 100% accurate. Yes, he was asking if we suggest drip edge flashing rather than your standard L flashing for the perimeter of a deck surface. And yes, we do suggest a drip edge flashing to prevent the excess runoff of material, especially with fluid applied materials. Yes, we want to mask off the perimeter of the deck to prevent overlap, but as an additional measure, drip edge flashing is often suggested, especially on multi-level living, so that way you don't hit the balconies below. You've got it. Yes. So Ernesto has the Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat, single component, brief mix. It's a fairly thick application. I have a different trowel for that one, Ernesto. Better notch. Those are pretty small. So he's going to use the V-notch trowel for this application. That will help us to achieve the appropriate mil thickness, one, but also to allow this material to perform its self-leveling abilities. You'll notice as he trowels out that material, whether you were to use a notch squeegee or a V-notch trowel, those trowel marks will help that material to self-level out to achieve the appropriate mil thickness. We also offer mil gauges so that you can double check the mil thickness during your application. Of course, on a large project, you're not going to check each spot. The way that I always suggest is start on one side, check the far side, Go to the middle, check the middle, go to the other far side, double check the mill thickness. And that way you can make sure that it's uniform throughout the entire project. So he's going to trowel apply that base coat. And Diego's going to double check that mill thickness of the base coat after it's been troweled, and then we'll back roll that material to ensure that we prevent the possibility of that material outgassing or causing bubbles into the coating. 3/4 inch nap on this one. You can use a 3/4 inch, 3/8 inch, either one should be satisfactory. Moderate pressure, you don't want to cause a ponding area. So he's going to check the far side, check the center, and then check the other side. His goal is about 30 to 32 wet mils, so his goal is to be in between that 30 and 35 on the mill gauge. And you'll be able to see the small impressions in the mill gauge that is left over from the mill gauge. Since it is self-leveling, just about immediately after, that material will fill in those divots. After double checking the mill thickness, he's going to back roll that material. He's going to work north and south, and then east and west, and cross-hatch that back roll. Using a fresh nap, he'll pull some of that material. However, when working with a nap roller that already has the material on there, it's going to allow you to build up that mill thickness a little better. And you'll notice those roller marks, as he back rolls that material, it self-levels while that material is still wet. That's exactly what we're looking for. This is going to help us to achieve the proper mill thickness that we're going for, which is 30 to 32 wet mils. Definitely not to exceed the 35 mark. This Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat takes 16 to 24 hours to cure. So most commonly, surface preparation is done the first day, reinforce your flashing, reinforce your joists. Second day, they'll come back, prime the surface, start early enough in the day to where the weather or the temperature is not so much of a factor. After that primer has achieved its cure time within about 1 to 3 hours, this Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat will be squeegee or notch trowel applied, followed by back rolling that material and allowed to fully cure for the remainder of the day. We want that 16 to 24 hour mark that allows this material to not only just cure at the surface, however, it cures from the inside out. So it gives us the ability to get a complete cure. At this point, once that Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat is completely cured, that's your waterproofing membrane. So you'd be waterproof, so to speak. Now we'll get into my favorite product, which would be the Tufflex base coat. This Elasta-Tuff 5000, you'll notice that once it cures, it dries to a rubberized coating, and so does the Tufflex base coat, which we'll display shortly. No. So, this is that rubberized 5000 base coat. Once completely cured, it'll dry to almost a rubberized coating where you could even make an indent in the coating and it's going to sponge right back. That's our goal, is to create a nice waterproofing membrane that you can't easily penetrate. So moving to our Tufflex base coat, we offer two varieties of the Tufflex base coat. The Tufflex base coat is our water catalyzed moisture cure base membrane. So, with the Tufflex base coat, it's available in standard outdoor RBC, or it's available in solvent-free Tuff. Solvent-free, I suggest for the applications for residential properties or areas where they're going to be over living space. So that way it's not such a fragrant odor for that Tufflex base coat. However, we also offer the standard outdoor base coat. For new builds or brand new construction, I typically gear towards the standard outdoor base coat. It does incorporate the solvent, so it's a bit more fragrant, but each performs the same. The mixing ratio of water to base membrane is the same. Tufflex base coats come with a green catalyst, a 1 ounce vial of a green catalyst. Can you pass me the catalyst, please, Diego? Tufflex base coat comes with these 1 ounce green catalysts. This, along with the water, will help to accelerate the cure time of that Tufflex base coat. So, it can be applied without the green catalyst, but it'll be a slower cure time. You're looking at about the same cure time as the Elasta-Tuff 5000 base membrane, about 16 to 24 hours. However, when incorporating this green catalyst, this Tufflex base coat will significantly decrease in its cure time and cut that material down to about a 3 to 8 hour cure depending on the temperatures outside. 1 ounce green vial per 5 gallon pail. Do not exceed 2 green vials per 5 gallon pail, or else it will go the opposite direction and slow down the cure time. So in colder temperatures, you can mix an additional 1 ounce vial. However, I find, especially in California, 1 ounce vial will do it. 3 to 8 hours allow it to cure.
Or you don't use it at all.
Or don't use it at all, if that's your preferred method. However, it will take significantly longer for that material to cure if you do not mix in. So the 1 ounce green vial is optional. However, I always suggest it because the major function of this Tufflex base membrane is to be a faster curing material than our Elasta-Tuff 5000, which is the single component. Here you go, Diego. If you want to dump the rags out, you can use that pail. Or this one. Got it? So typically, with this Tufflex base membrane, our applicators will usually split a 5 gallon pail in half, 2.5 gallons in each pail. And then 1 gallon of water is mixed per 5 gallon pail. So since you split the pail in half, you split your increments of water in half. Mixing that Tufflex base membrane with the water, very similar to mixing both components of our epoxy primer, will induct the cure time of that material. So you want to be very specific in relation to the pot life of this Tufflex base coat. Tufflex base has a pot life of about 15 to 20 minutes, very similar to our epoxy primer if mixed with the catalyst. If not mixed with the catalyst, you're looking at probably about 25 to 30 minutes pot life. However, if it's onto the deck surface, you have a significant amount more of a work time. Very similar to our 5000 base coat, the Tufflex base coat shall be trowel applied, followed by backrolling. The benefit of this Tufflex base membrane is that you can exceed the 48 mils, you can go up to 60 mils with this Tufflex base membrane in a single pass without the possibility of it outgassing so much. Something that you would not be able to accomplish with that Elasta-Tuff 5000 base coat. So this base membrane allows a lot more fluctuation of that application. You can go as thin as 48 mils, or you can go as thick as 64 mils with this Tufflex base coat in a single pass. If you wanted to exceed that 60 mils, I then suggest 2 passes, but completely up to your prerogative. 1 pass, even at 60 mils, will create a nice, thick waterproofing membrane. Better resistance, more flexible than the Elasta-Tuff 5000 because of that curing process, especially with that green catalyst. It's a bit more flexible. Tufflex base coat was originally designed to be installed at ski resorts, to waterproof ski resorts. So it has the ability to endure some of the most harsh temperatures that you could possibly expose a waterproof coating to. It has the ability to endure a heavy freeze thaw cycles or even temperatures where it exceeds 100 degrees quite often. This is a very popular material in Arizona, Las Vegas, because of those abilities to endure those heavy cycles. You want to completely mix that material to make sure you create a nice uniform material. Make sure that you mix in all of the water with all of the catalyst without any separation into that base coat. Most commonly used, the slow speed drill mixer with the egg beater attachment, of course. That'll help to accelerate this mixing process a bit. With that Tufflex base, if you're mixing by hand, you want to make sure that you scrape along the walls of the pail as well as the base of the pail, so that way you can pull any of the raw materials from the base. Before beginning the mixing process and adding your green catalyst or water, I always suggest a brief blend or mix with the slow speed drill mixer to make sure that any settlement at the base of the pail, you can pull into the center of the pail and make sure you get a nice consistency. So, in your 5-gallon pail, I suggest mixing the Tufflex base coat all the way at the base of the pail before beginning your mixing procedure or splitting the pail in half. Diego's going to scrape along the walls, make sure that he scrapes the base of the pail. Question? The 5,000? Correct. So the question was, is the Elasta-Tuff 5000 a base coat? You are correct. The Elasta-Tuff 5000 is a base coat. The Tufflex solvent-free or standard outdoor are also Tufflex base coats. For the solvent-free and standard outdoor, the question is if the difference between standard outdoor and solvent-free is the odor. Yes, that will be the major difference because the standard outdoor incorporates solvent during the production process, whereas a solvent-free does not incorporate any solvents into that base membrane, all of which are your waterproofing membranes. Tufflex standard outdoor, Tufflex solvent-free, or Elasta-Tuff 5000. So pour out into the center of the deck the Tufflex base membrane. Our goal is a minimum of 48 mils thick. Now, with a plywood application, our Tufflex base membrane is specified to be installed at 60 mils thick, 64 mils thick. For a concrete application, the Tufflex base membrane is specified to be installed at 48 mils thick. So a bit of a thinner pass of the Tufflex base coat over concrete, of course, because it won't shift as much as a plywood substrate might. So he's going to trowel, or you could use a notch squeegee for this application. You want to make sure that you pull this material tight to the deck surface. This is also a self-leveling moisture-cure material, so this one will set up very similar to the 5000. In addition, we're going to assist that not only with a notch trowel or a notch squeegee, but we'll backroll this material to prevent the possibility of outgassing, but also to help us to create a nice uniform surface of that Tufflex base membrane. Get a little material on his nap so that way he's not pulling material once he starts his application of that Tufflex base coat. Because of those self-leveling properties, this will also self-level after he back rolls it. So you won't be able to see your roller marks, you won't be able to see the trowel marks. That's the benefit of these polyurethanes and these flexible coatings. This too, as well as the 5000 base coat, will cure to a rubberized membrane. That's the goal that we want. We want a very flexible base membrane that will help us, even with that aliphatic top coat being abrasion resistant. It'll eliminate the possibilities of something, even if it's sharp, being able to puncture the base membrane. Yes. Oh, I think he has one over here. Thank you, Grant. Yes. So this would be an example of our Tufflex base or our Tufflex mill gauge. A variety of mill thickness on each side. Should I go here? A variety of mill thickness on each side. Each one of our coatings has a specific mill thickness that the coating should be applied at. On the back side, you have 35 through 80. Bottom side, you have 14 mils through 30. And then for thicker mill thickness, you have 7 through 12 here or 1 through 6 here. Our goals are typically within these sides. For the base membrane of 5000, of course, our goal is between this 35 and this 40, or this edge and this 35. And for the Tufflex base coat, we can go up to this 65 mil in a single pass. So each one of these widgets should leave an impression in the coating, so that way that's how you double check your wet mill thickness. And Diego will display that when he checks the mill thickness of this Tufflex base coat right now. And we will have mill gauges available for you all for excellent coatings as well as Tufflex as well. So you can see the impressions. His goal is to be around that, anywhere between that 45 and that 65 mil thick range. And you can see the widgets that it leaves a small impression there. But just about immediately self-levels out. That's exactly what we're looking for.
Is now a good time for me to jump in?
Yes.
Okay. And from the mill gauge standpoint, so for a quality check, you know, you want to have somebody doing that every, whatever, depending on how big your deck is, every couple hundred square feet, making sure that you're doing that quality check on each level. Yeah. So the question was, for a good quality control program, what's a good way to document this? And, you know, for your field install crew, if somebody's actually doing spot checking, oftentimes we'd have a plan view of the deck, and you could write what that measurement is on each coating, keep a copy of that, take a picture of that. Boom, you've got an actual reliable quality inspection document that you can even give over to the end user to show that, you know, you're properly inspecting your work. So I'll hit a couple things here. Earlier I mentioned, you know, all the accessories that we offer. You can find all of these on our website and all of our branches. We're doing a better job at properly stocking these from the sundry and all of the consumables. So first we talked about, you know, just your simple heavy cage frame roller. This is a heavier duty one, not a plastic one. If you're putting too much pressure on it on, you know, a 5-6 foot stick, that it's going to snap here at the handle. And then I talked about the different types of rollers. So I'll bring it up here a little closer. So we have the dripless roller. So this is what you'd want to use for a thicker coating system, an epoxy system, epoxy primer, and then your standard polyester. You know, we have every size kind of from 1/4 inch up to 1.5 inches for some of our really thicker coatings that you'll see. When you're getting into, well, I'll go with the bigger frame. So this is one of my favorite frames that we carry. It'll go from a 9 to an 18 inch. So it's just got wire nuts here. Get to that 18 inch. We've got 18 inch rollers, dripless also on your bigger systems, but we also have the regular polyester. When it comes to the finishing coat or back rolling, this is gonna help you make sure that you blend any lines, you know. Just like you're painting a wall, you wanna work one direction and make sure you're taking that. If you're working right to left, you're covering that right line as you keep going. This is reusable, comes with end caps, Some of the rollers we sell come with end caps. There's nothing worse than being on a job and running out with end caps. Make sure you have extras of these. Make sure your crew takes them out before you throw away rollers. You know, they're a couple bucks a pop, so that adds up over the life of a job. This is a great, great tool. Every crew should have this, in my opinion. When it comes to detailing, you know, we got the smaller, you know, you may hear the weenie roller, hot dog roller, smaller rollers. We also have these, though, as well in the dripless version. So when you're dealing with that thicker, more viscous material and you got to move it around. And then we've got chip brushes in sizes 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch. So you can never have too many of these. We sell them by the individual, but you also can buy, you know, boxes of them as well. And then just for cleaning on the job site, we have boxes of scrubs. We've also got 10-pound boxes of white knit rags. We've got rags in a box, so just making sure you have something for your crew to do the work cleanly. G-grip gloves, we have sizes typically from medium, large, XL, with a cut resistance on them. And then the neoprene gloves, you know, that keep your hands clean for the mixing, what these guys are using as well. So we have full paint containers, so this is like a dripless setup. So hey, we know we're doing an epoxy system. You can just get a one-stop buy here. It's also got a detailing brush and then a little thicker, heavier duty paint container. And then we have all the tapes you would need as well, you know, so the masking tapes, the blue tape, green tape, duct tapes as well for taping temporary protection and things like that. So so stay tuned. I'll get into more of the detailing and texture hand tools, but I'll let you get right back to it, okay?
Thank you, Grant. So since we're getting familiar with our Tufflex base coats, we've done the Elasta-Tuff 5000, we've done the Tufflex base coat. We'll move into our aggregate binding coat. With our polyurethane systems, our aggregate binding coat is to create slip resistance. Very similar to how Excellent Coatings has that texture coating, we want to be able to create a slip resistant surface, so we want something that could be a bit aggressive to offer that slip resistance. Our intermediate coat acts as an aggregate binding coat. Our intermediate coat is our fluid applied Elasta-Tuff 6000. You can either use the AR or the AL. Again, the AL is UV stable. Elasta-Tuff 6000 AR, which is the aromatic, does not have those same UV stable properties. So AR is okay to use as an aggregate binding coat. However, you don't want to use it as a final coat or a top coat. In this scenario, we'll use the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL. Just as we talked about, due to those VOC compliances, depending on where you're located, this is our Elasta-Tuff 6000 ALSC. It's a low VOC material, 100 VOC. We also offer higher solids materials for areas that aren't under such strict regulations. However, in our Southern California market, these are the materials that have to be a go-to. So this Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL is going to be used as an aggregate binding coat. We'll apply the liquid material first, allow it to get its initial set, and then broadcast that aggregate. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL can be trowel applied, followed by backrolling. Our spread rate for the Elasta-Tuff 6000 as an aggregate binding coat is 100 square feet per gallon. So a 5-gallon pail should yield 500 square feet in a project. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL takes 16 to 24 hours to cure. However, very similar to the Elasta-Tuff 5000, we do offer a color code accelerator to speed up that curing process if need be. With the Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL, you will roller apply or not squeegee, followed by back rolling to prevent the possibility of this material outgassing. And then while the coating is wet and open, you'll broadcast in a uniform fashion the sand aggregate, either a 20 mesh or a 30 mesh sand aggregate, broadcast 100% to refusal. So we want to beach the entire surface so that way we don't have any low spots or spots that still expose the liquid coating. We want it to be 100% broadcast to refusal. So excess sand is always going to be suggested The benefit of this excess aggregate is when you remove it from the surface, this sand can still be retained to move on through the next phase of your project. Recycling the sand will always help, one, to save money, but also keep you with a continuous eye on your project and keep you with enough information to know how much sand aggregate you use on a continuous basis. So, we're going to open this Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL coating. Make sure that our color is nice and uniform and consistent. Double check our label to make sure that the color is exactly what we identified. We're working with Elasta-Tuff 6000 ALSC Sidewalk Gray. That's exactly what we have. We'll pour out a small portion of this Elasta-Tuff 6000. We'll trowel apply this Elasta-Tuff 6000 over that base membrane. We still want to use the notch side of that trowel. We don't have to worry about puncturing that membrane because we know that our membrane allows some flexibility, being that it dries to that rubberized coating. So our goal is 100 square feet per gallon, 16 mil thick. So it's a very thin application for this aggregate binding coat. We'll trowel it out over the entire surface, and then once it's troweled over the entire surface, we'll backroll that material to prevent the possibility of outgassing. Similar to the Elasta-Tuff 5000, if you over apply this material or use an excess of this material in one single pass of the application, you run the risk of this material possibly outgassing. So you want to keep an eye on the thickness of your coating. Your spread rates and your mil thickness are your best friend. Be aware of how thick you're applying the material. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 takes 16 to 24 hours to cure, as I mentioned. However, we do offer accelerators that can significantly decrease that cure time down to about 8 hours. So typically with our guys, they do the surface preparation one day. Primer and base coat come the following day. Third day, they do the Elasta-Tuff 6000 and aggregate binding coat. Fourth day, final top coat. Leave the process to cure fully. So once it's been trowel or not squeegee applied over the entire deck surface at the appropriate mil thickness, you'll backroll that material so we can prevent the possibility of outgassing. And again, it's a very thin coat at 100 square feet per gallon. And he's also going to cross-hatch this material as well, north, south, east, and west. Now, once backrolled and the material is applied in a nice uniform fashion, Diego's going to broadcast this aggregate 100% to refusal. He's going to fully beach this project. His goal is not to throw the aggregate into the coating. However, you want to allow gravity to be your best friend. And our goal is a nice uniform coating, so he's just toss it into the air and let the sand fall where it may. When broadcasting your sand aggregate, one of the major emphasis is keeping an eye on where your low spots are. So if you notice that you have a fully beached area here and you're missing aggregate here, along with those spiked shoes, it gives you a possibility to walk back over that coating, broadcast a little extra aggregate wherever need may be. If you throw the aggregate into the coating directly, you run the risk of pushing some of that coating. That's what we want to try to avoid. So gravity is our best friend in this broadcast aggregate phase. In my opinion, more is always a little better to make sure that we don't have any small pockets or voids. So always be aware of that excess aggregate. He's going to fill in any low spots that he sees. If he sees liquid coating still exposed, he'll fill in those gapped areas to make sure that we have a nice uniform surface. Especially around the perimeters. Correct. So it can be broadcast directly into the flashing as well. We're at that vertical turn angle. That'll offer some slip resistance. So you're not going to walk across the vertical angle, but you'd like to create a nice uniform surface. So for that aesthetic purpose, you can broadcast directly over that flashing as well. And each of the coatings shall overlap the flashing and be installed vertically up the flashing as well. These fluid applied materials will not sag if applied in a thin pass vertically. If you wanted to install a thicker pass, especially in relation to the Elasta-Tuff 5000, we have a thickening agent to give you the ability to trowel that material up vertically as well. This aggregate binding coat you'll allow to cure for 16 to 24 hours. So third day of your application, leave your sand there, fully beached surface. The following day you'd come back, blow off the excess aggregate or use a stiff bristle broom to remove the excess aggregate. Make sure that you don't have any voids or low spots. And then you'd be ready to top coat that aggregate or encapsulate that aggregate with our Elasta-Tuff 6000 ALSC top coat.
You good if I jump in, Howard?
Yes.
No? Good
Go
break?
for it. Go
Okay.
for it.
Have you guys talked about the church key?
We have not.
Okay, let's grab that really fast. So, Tufflex has, heavy duty metal pails. Some of our other manufacturers do as well. So this is a church key if you're not familiar. It's a great tool. Again, use the right tool for the right job. Oftentimes you'll see guys with, flathead screwdriver, things like that. This has a little bend into it to help open it. There's other types of can openers too that can have a church key version of it, but also a pail opener to get the lids on plastic. So just from a safety standpoint and efficiency standpoint, when you're talking about labor hours, make sure you have a good amount of these for your crew. And then I was just gonna jump into a couple things. So first you'll notice some of the sunshine supply buckets here. So we have these custom made. Yes, they look good. They got our logo on them, but they're also a heavier duty PPE, so you can mix in them. You're not gonna have the bottom blow out on you. You guys need to get more materials. What's the number for Sunshine Supply? What do? Here on the back are all of our locations with all of our phone numbers. If any of your guys in the field need to make a last minute call, we're there to help support you guys during our business hours. Howard mentioned spike shoes. So when you're working on top of a coating and you got to get from point A to point B, obviously you want to plan your work your plan, and work your way back out of an area. But sometimes there's no way around it. So these will strap on to your shoes. These are our more economical version that you'll be able to get for about $30 or less before tax. We have heavier duty version ones. We have ones that slide right on, but they come at a higher price point. But every crew should have at least a couple pairs of these as well. And then we'll just talk about troweling here quickly and finishing hand tools. So we've got all different types of finishing trowels, pool trowels, rounded edge, different types of handle offerings. So just know that you can get these on our website or at our local branches. For more of just a squeegee application, spreading material, we've got different versions of magic trowels, from 12 inches all the way up to, I believe we have up to 26-inch wide magic trowels. So these are just also a screw-on attachment. We'll be raffling off one of these as well. And then this is one of my favorite tools, and I believe Howard will be using it here shortly. So this is the Easy Squeegee. So it comes in two different sizes, 18, and then I believe this is a 26-inch. So what is nice about this, you can do any job with this frame, and then you can pull off and then change the actual blade. So this is just a flat blade, but they have different mill thicknesses. Here's like your primer mill thickness. You can build up to maybe like a urethane deck coating, and then we're talking, 50 plus mils for maybe some form of like a roof coating where you're doing multiple passes or a self-leveling. So, hey, let's at least get to our starting point. Let's get this material, let's get it spread. Howard mentioned on one of the coatings wanting to get like 35 to 45 mil. So I'd say you're using the 40 to 45 to spread. So then, from a quality control standpoint, you're at least meeting that minimum thickness. And then you're probably just working right into a back rolling situation. So we'll also be raffling off one of these as well. And like I said, very simple. So simple I can do it. And then it's just a wing nut attachment here, and you're off and running. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Howard, we have a question from the live. Regarding the wear coat, are rubber granulars an option instead of sand? And is there a benefit or downside to using rubber granulars?
Thank you. Yes, rubber granules are an optional aggregate that can be used even rather than the sand. However, the rubber granules would be broadcast into the Tufflex base membrane rather than into the Elasta-Tuff 5000. So the structure of a rubber granule system would be the Tuff-Poxy primer over the substrate, plywood or concrete, your Tufflex base membrane, and then while that membrane, after it gets its initial set, usually takes about 30 to 45 minutes, you broadcast 100% to refusal our EPDM 1430 rubber granules. Those rubber granules will slightly sink into that membrane, but they'll act as they'll serve the same function as the sand aggregate in our aggregate binding coat. Once that base membrane is cured, then you can do 2 additional passes of the aliphatic top coat, the Elasta-Tuff 6000, is the way that I structure that rubber granule system, and we do have some cured samples of that system as well.
Hey Grant, I had a question back to the spike shoes. Are those one size fits all or size specific?
Very good question. No, one size fits all. You can adjust the straps as needed to, get tight to your boot. And then there's other ones that as you slide your foot into it, it's got enough of like a gasket pressure to then bite to your boot. So all of the ones we have, this is like an heavy duty HDPE. We have ones that are metal and just a little thicker gauge bottom, but they all have straps, so they can be adjusted. Good question. Thank you.
So back to our aggregate binding coat. Once that aggregate has been broadcast, we've allowed that coating to fully cure. We'll be left with a deck surface that looks very similar to this here. We've removed the excess aggregate, made sure that we don't have any high spots or any excessive sand aggregate. Going to use the flat side of the trowel to scrape against that sand to make sure that we don't have any areas where there's built up sand and built up material, because we like a nice aesthetically pleasing finish that functions very well. Once we've double checked to make sure that we don't have any high spots, the Elasta-Tuff 6000 ALSC can be used as a top coat, or should be used as a top coat rather. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 ALSC is available in 8 standard colors, and then we also can color match. However, that can be a bit pricey, and there are minimum quantities that are required. Each one of our Elasta-Tuff 6000 AL products are already pre-pigmented during the production process, so a company like Sunshine Supply does not have to pigment these products or tint these products for us like they would, for instance, the Excel-Crete 300. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 is available in sidewalk gray, 3 variations of gray: Pacific gray, sidewalk gray, as well as rocky gray, which is a much deeper tint. We do have color charts available as well. It's available in a white, brick red, desert tan, and Monterey sand. The desert tan and the Monterey sand are 2 variations of tan. On top of that, we also offer an additional clear polyurethane top coat under our MCU glaze. And each one of these top coats are VOC compliant as well. So if we need low VOC, we have those. If you need a higher VOC content, we also offer that. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 ALSC top coat, applied as a top coat.
What's your guys' turnaround time on the custom colors? I don't know if it's a question for you or for them.
Custom colors, as long as we can, first you'd have to provide us a color to match. Usually it take about 2 to 3 weeks, not for the color matching, but to be full scaled into production. Yes. The minimum quantity that has to be offered, or excuse me, purchased for a color match is 350 gallons minimum. So typically it's only for larger projects where we see that. And then we do request a color matching fee as well of $350. So we'll trowel apply this Elasta-Tuff 6000, or you can use a flat squeegee to encapsulate that aggregate, pull the material very tight to the deck surface, and then back roll that material of the Elasta-Tuff 6000 to fully encapsulate all of the aggregate that was broadcast. So he's going to back roll that material, and of course he's going to crosshatch, north-south, east-west. The Elasta-Tuff 6000 takes 16 to 24 hours to cure. We do offer an accelerator for that Elasta-Tuff 6000 that can significantly decrease that cure time to about half of that time.
And is that just added to the pail?
Correct. That would be mixed in or blended in, very similar to how we do the water and catalyst to the Tufflex base coat. You would mix it right into your 5-gallon pail that's available in pints, quarts, and half pints as well. No, you're basically cutting out half of the cure time. So 16 to 24 hours is the standard. Mixing that Elasta-Tuff accelerator will decrease that cure time to about 8 hours. Warmer temperatures, even less. Colder temperatures, still a little higher. So after we've back rolled that material, completely encapsulated that aggregate, we want to allow the system to completely cure with each level for a full 24 hours before exposing to light pedestrian traffic, and we want to allow 36 hours before anything heavy is placed onto the deck surface, such as potted plants, patio furniture, or anything of that nature. So 24 hours after the complete system is installed, it's ready for light pedestrian traffic. 36 hours after the system is installed, you can reapply your furniture onto the deck surface, or any potted plants or heavy things that you keep outside of the deck surface. Any other questions for the Tufflex systems? Yes, sir? The most common mistake when installing the Tufflex systems, be it base coat, top coat, it's applying the material too thick. That is the most common, and then the regards of bubbles or outgassing into the coating. These typically happen when there's an over application of material. The way to repair that is you'd have to lightly grind or sand down that coating to remove the bubbles. If it's a small area, you can mask it off and tape it off. Grind down that surface slightly just to remove those bubbles and any craters that they may cause. Lightly prime the surface depending how long the coating has been exposed already, and then do another pass of the Elasta-Tuff 6000, for instance, if it were the top coat. If you run into bubbles or craters into the base coat, virtually the same thing would occur. However, you want to accomplish that with the proper mil thickness of the base coat. So if it's 5,000, you want to accomplish that mil thickness of 32 mils. If it's the Tufflex base, if you applied it at 48, you want to recreate that 48 mil thick coat. To prevent the possibility of a difference in the look or the aesthetics, I always encourage, if you have to patch an area, let's recoat the entire deck surface, but let's tie in that coating that we have to replace or repair, and then let's do an additional coat over the top. So that way you don't see where an area was patched. I find it more aesthetically pleasing. Yes, sir. The Tufflex system, the question was, can the Tufflex system be used on stairs? Yes, sir, it can. However, when you come to those vertical transitions, you want to either brush coat that material to prevent the possibility of a heavy saturation or a heavy pass of that material and possible sag, or in relation to like our 5,000 base coat, you want to mix in that thickener and accelerator that I spoke about, because it'll give you the ability to be able to trowel that material vertically without the material sagging. Correct. So you would broadcast over the horizontal and broadcast over the edge or the vertical transition as well. Any other questions, gentlemen? Sir? Correct. So the question is if these are waterproof coatings. Yes, these are complete waterproofing systems. So each one of these coatings work in conjunction with our systems that we offer, be it water-based acrylic systems like our excellent coating systems, or polyurethane or polyurea systems like our Tufflex products. For outdoors, correct. balcony decks, walkways, porta-shares, helipads, parking structures, pretty much wherever you can run into a waterproofing necessity. Yes, yes, they can be exposed to vehicular traffic. We do offer vehicular traffic coating systems as well. Very similar to our Elasta-Tuff 5000, 6000 pedestrian, which is a single component system. Each one of these coatings also work in conjunction with our Elasta-Tuff 566 vehicular system. The major difference between the pedestrian traffic coating system and the vehicular traffic coating system is we suggest a more aggressive aggregate to be broadcast into that aggregate binding coat. Either a 216 mesh sand aggregate, a 16 grit, or a 12 grit sand aggregate as well. And that'll give us a very aggressive texture coat, so that way it'd be able to endure that vehicular traffic while also keeping intact that waterproofing membrane. Sir?
You recommend this for pool decks?
Yes, I actually have a project that was installed in a pool deck not too long ago where the 5000, 6000 pedestrian system was used, but only around the pool deck. You kind of want to terminate around the coving of the pool, just so that way we don't run the possibility of water saturation unless they're going to drain the pool completely. And we don't offer at the moment interior pool coatings, but it is something that we're working on as well.
I'm asking you because 10 years ago, 8 years ago, we did a pool.
With the 5000?
I didn't consult with anyone. I just did it. And still the same.
Performed well. Yes, sir.
8 years ago.
Nice. Let me know when you need a recoat. Any other questions? Thank you kindly. I believe that we're going to have a raffle, and pizza and drinks are on the way now. Thank you very much, guys.